Vanguard rides again. Now ignore the douchey sunglasses inside look. I'm trying to emulate Harlan Ellison, which is a very fitting subject to be emulating um, in regards to what I'm talking about in this video. Now I was watching a recent Young Ripper 59 video by the great Eric July, aka creator of the Rippaverse, and he mentioned that he was talking about how these creators always try to represent their cultural beliefs in the work that they're doing, and they think they have a what's the word I want to use? They have a prerogative to do this, I guess, a mandate to do this. And this is something I've been thinking about for a long time. I've been noticing this in different works. I'd always think to myself, why do writers think the only way to make something complex or interesting or nuanced is to make that work reflect whatever is going on currently? And this is not to say that reflecting or at least modeling issues and concepts is a thing that is unique to works now. And this is not to say that it's always a bad thing. I mean, it's been happening for literally centuries. Like, writers would use works to explore certain ideas and concepts and philosophies, and maybe try to make larger points with them. But a lot of the work now, I feel like, doesn't even do that. It'll just be like, it will take current issue, right? It'll take current issue. It will have bad guy and good guy, and then it will have analogs for bad guy and analogs for good guy. And there will be no nuance whatsoever. Or if there is nuance, it's very superficial nuance. It's like, the character's a bad guy, but they think they're doing the right thing. And it's like, of course they think they're doing the right thing. It's like, I don't know, man. I just don't see it. I always wonder to myself, why do people think this stuff is so deep and stimulating? Because it represents what's really going on, I guess. And I think it becomes very jarring depending on how much of a fictional world the work is in. It's one thing if your fictional world is deeply reflective of the real world, it's the world right outside your window, right? But it's another thing if your world is literally like Lord of the Rings, where it has its own mythology, its own system of rules and logic, and it's like a separate, completely separate universe. Not even a separate universe in terms of physics or anything. A universe that just does not resemble our universe whatsoever. And they're talking about how this work needs to reflect the times. And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Even when Tolkien wrote the damn thing, it didn't reflect the times. He's like, he wrote it reflecting times long gone. He did that on purpose. So I don't know, man. It's very weird when I see this very overt attempt to do this, because I never find it that interesting. And I guess it would be interesting if they actually had something to say, but a lot of the time I feel like they don't. For example, right? I was watching The Boys, and spoiler alert, at the end of The Boys, Homelander kills some guy because the guy threw something at his son, and the characters start cheering. And I remember looking at it, and I was just like, it's so funny how predictable this shit is, too, because I was thinking in my head, I was like, I feel like that's a reference to something having to do with politics, because the last season of The Boys was, Jesus Christ, the whole goddamn thing was just, look at these politics, they're bad, these are bad politics and bad people, and then all the villains were just a representation of, I guess, the bad guys in the real world. And so I Googled it, and then it turned out it was a reference to Trump saying he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and his followers would cheer. And I'm looking at it, I'm just like, okay, whatever. So now, like I said, I don't think it's very profound in the first place. If the only thing you can do to make a work compelling is to try and make it reflect whatever social issue is currently going on. But I also think it's dumb because it will make your work very dated. I was watching another video with the Critical Drinker talking to Clifton Duncan on his podcast, and the Critical Drinker was comparing, let's say, past Star Wars to current Star Wars, and he was talking about the timeless qualities of the current. And it's like, you know, when you make a work that is timeless, you do very much what I mentioned earlier, where you're exploring certain ideas and philosophies, but you do them in a way where they're more abstract and removed from the current world. So basically, they can exist at any time. And there are many books I've read that were written eons ago. Like I remember I read this book called Black No More, and that book dealt with deeply sociological issues. But I felt the way it was written is the ideas were so, I guess, were handled a little differently. You know, they were explored in depth in a way that they just didn't feel so stuck in the times. So like when you're looking at these works, when people look at these works in the future, I feel like they're not going to relate to them as much as people think they are. Because one, I already don't relate to them right now. Like the themes they explore already aren't very universal. And it's not just me. Many people look at these things and they're just like, what the fuck? Like, I'll give you an example of the supposed themes that are so universal that people, I guess, all people should experience and understand. I was on Facebook. No, not Facebook. I don't even use Facebook anymore. Sorry, Instagram. At least I think it was Instagram. And there was like this video, and it was this black guy, black business owner, and first it was a white business owner. He goes into the bank, he signs this thing, he takes out a check, blah blah blah. The black business owner comes in, and the person's like, "Oh, I think you're in the wrong place." And he's like, "No, I'm in the right place." And then he signs the check, and he's trying to get his money out, and the woman's giving him trouble. And I guess the idea is, oh, because he's black, it's racist. And I guess we're all supposed to go, oh, in solidarity, I experienced that, my brother. But instead, I looked at it, and I was like, what the fuck? In my head, I immediately thought of the multiple times I'd gone into the bank with almost zero identification. Because I remember one time I lost my wallet, and I lost like almost all my identification. And I forgot what I had. I think it was my social, and that's all I had. And they still let me take out money. And I was just like, what happened? So in my head, I'm just like, I don't, like, not everyone can relate to this. Like, sure, have people experienced racism? Obviously. But this idea that racism is this thing that permeates your very existence and your every interaction is going to be racist in some way because you live in a white-dominated society is like, no, it's not. That's not how most black people live. I'm literally willing to say that's not how most black people live. Because one, the majority of black people live in neighborhoods with other black people. So this idea that the white man is going to have his foot on our necks in every single social interaction is very bizarre. So like, I'm watching the video and I'm thinking to myself, there's no way anyone relates to this, right? And I looked through the comments and lo and behold, no one fucking related to it. And it wasn't just, like, a lot of these people were black. And there's like, what the hell is going on in this video? Like, no one, first of all, people didn't even understand what was going on in the video, just to show you that it wasn't universal. But yeah, I just really believe that these worlds would be much more interesting and much more unique if they dealt with problems specific to the lore of the universe, rather than trying to model certain, not even certain, very specific things currently happening. And like for like the last 4 fucking years, I mean longer than that, to be honest. Wait, 2016, 2015, 2020, yeah, about like 4 years or so, every single thing has been telling a plot about some analog to Donald Trump, and it's like everything's an analog to Donald Trump. Like it just gets old. It gets really, really old and really, really boring. Or if it's not Donald Trump, it'll be like, this is about toxic masculinity or some bullshit like that. And it's come on, man. It's like a few times okay, but it's like if everything's about the same thing, not only is your universal, concept or idea not very universal, but then to top it off, it's overdone. Everything's doing it. It's not interesting. It's like I click on your show and you're talking about toxic masculinity or Donald Trump and his cronies or whatever. That's what. Well, of course, it's never. And that's the other thing, right? All right. Before I get to that last point, you know what? Let me finish my last point so I don't sound like a crazy person. If you're all doing the same thing, and I keep seeing the same thing over and over, it's like the shock value is gone. There's no impact anymore, There's no revelation. It's like I turn on the TV and I'm like, oh, Trump's the villain in this one too? Okay, all right, okay, yeah, I get it. That's what we do now. Trump's the villain and everything, okay. But the other thing is just, it's like, they're so thinly veiled, these supposed representations of these current issues. Like, there's not even any depth or skill in the way they craft or weave them into these stories. Like, in Young Justice, having Lex Luthor literally look into the camera when he's on a show and go, fake news, is like, that's what it's like. I don't even have anything to say. It's just like, when that shit happened, I was like, sigh. It's very stupid. The worst example of this, I think, the dumbest example, was taking the Red Skull. And I remember when I saw this is old news, but I just have to talk about this because I remember thinking of this at the time, and I never got the chance to ever make a video about this because back then I wasn't on YouTube. But a long time ago, they took the Red Skull and they tried to make him like an analog to Jordan Peterson. Well, you know, most people were like, oh, they're turning Jordan Peterson to Red Skull. They're trying to say Jordan Peterson is the Red Skull, this villain. They were doing that, but also not. Because you got to understand the way a lot of these people think is Jordan Peterson is just like a representation of a problem. So they chose Jordan Peterson because in their mind he's far-right ideology manifest, even though he's probably the least far-right guy on YouTube ever. Anyways, so they had they had Red Skull with like something saying 10 rules for life, a bunch of other things referencing specific quotes that Jordan Peterson made, and Jordan Peterson took it on the chin. You know, he fucking made a T-shirt that said "Hail Lobster" and, you know, made some money off of his enemies, just as Ed July would say you should do. But the thing that was so stupid about that, as I was looking at this, I was like, even if they wanted to represent Jordan Peterson as a villain, there was about 1,000 better ways they could have done it. I was like, you have a character like Dr. Faust, who hasn't been around for a long time, and you want to, your run is new. This is your new Captain America run, right? One of the best things you could do with a new run is you can either, in order to put your stamp of approval, this is actually probably the worst thing you could do from a marketing perspective. You should probably stick to what works. But let's say you wanted to put your stamp of approval on this project. You wanted to give it that specific touch, right? Your specific flavor. You would take you'd make a brand new character, like a brand new villain, or maybe some new characters. That's almost what they always do. Or you would take an old villain, like let's say a C-lister, and you would make them interesting. You would change some aspects of them and, you know, make them brand new and just deeper and edgier and cooler, right? So you could have taken Faust, right? You could have taken Faust and you could have had him be center stage. And you could have had Faust be your analog for Jordan Peterson. And the story could have been about Faust using hypnosis techniques through the internet to radicalize people. And boom! You have an interesting plot line with Dr. Faust, which you could have even lied and claimed wasn't inspired by Jordan Peterson at all. You didn't even have to mention the 10 rules for life stuff. You could have given him his own philosophy that was kind of analogous, but not really. But no, instead they just were like, Red Skull, we're going to have him parrot the words of Jordan Peterson. And yeah, that's great story writing, I guess. But it's just boring. It's tiring. I think writers should stop it. Please stop it. Like, I can't even remember the last time anything I ever wrote was directly, because yeah, I do writing too. I'm trying to make a book. It isn't out yet, so there's nothing to plug here, but I've been writing since I was like, I don't know, 10. Actually younger than that. Probably since I was like 8. I've been writing for a long time. And before that, I used to tell stories orally, like my ancestors. But anyways, so I've never written anything that was directly referencing current events unless it was meant to specifically talk about those events. So like, and even then it was always very abstract. Like I remember I had an idea for a story where I wanted to make fun of the trendiness that people have in this world, the trend following and trend setting, and how you can get someone to do anything as long as you turn it into a trend. That whole chic thing. I mean, at the time this was happening, you had people doing shit like, had people doing all these stupid challenges and like licking ice cream and all sorts of goofy shit. So I wrote a story where the idea was this guy finds a way to make it that you can eat cadavers without getting sick, and and the idea was to show that as long as something is steeped in the times, you can remove morality from it whatsoever, in any way, shape, or form. So he makes a restaurant chain around eating flesh, and it becomes this thing people start doing. People just start eating flesh because it's just a new cool thing to do. And that's like one of the only times I ever did something like that. And even then, it was like a very abstract concept that wasn't even that steeped in the times. Like someone could read that 30 years later, and the core message will still stick. But someone's gonna be watching that episode of Young Justice I mentioned, and when Lex Luthor goes fake news, 30 years from now, they're gonna be like, what the fuck is he talking about? It's like, what does that mean? Well, hey, whatever, man. To each their own. People can do whatever they want. Yeah. Well, on that note, Vanguard out.